sound is never the same. Sound is something that's with us at every moment of creating music. Right now is figuring out what sounds you're actually going to use and how you're going to use them.
Slung over a 60-mile-high wall of iron in my bisected activity space.
So with this project, we wanted to minimize the process, and we told these artists to select from these palettes of sounds and use those as kind of building blocks to create a full composition.
Common domestic animal, the yolk of inauspicious stars.
Well, I was given a group of photographs, and one directly spoke to me of the diving into the silverware, kind of losing yourself in it. My recording process was similar, going down that hole. And I recorded it at night in my room, kind of in the dark, letting myself go into a very free, organic state where I just made whatever I've made without any reservations. I chose the silverware drawer because I have a silverware drawer in my house that is always falling out and driving me crazy, and also it was my favorite piece, and I like the idea of working with the sounds of silverware. They're sparkly and making all those sparkles kind of glisten in in a dark realm. The feelings of working on this piece were more guttural than anything emotional, that I just dove into it and it became whatever it became, and it was liberating to do me, but do it in such a collaborative sense, or like connected with this piece. The person in the drawer to me wasn't quite a person, but kind of like a shell of a person, where you go from one state of like yourself and the world that we live in and the silverware. We don't use our hands, we use our silverware, and it sometimes can get so frustrating, these mundane things where you got to use your fork and knife, but you don't want to. You just want to slam your face into the drawer or the plate of food or whatever and do your thing. I typically don't look at visual art and write songs about specific pieces. There is imagery in everything that I write, in a story, but this was different, and I've never done anything like this before. It brought out a very raw side of myself where there were no questions of what I was doing or any rules that should be made or broken. It was just stream of thought and an absolute feeling where I didn't redo much, just let it kind of happen.
We had a wonderful snow day last week. School was canceled, and so was work. The boys were back in town. The policeman drove the big car around the stop sign and slammed the brakes to avoid hitting a squirrel who was scurrying along, insolent little shit, with an armful of nuts to bring back the Squirrelville and bring smiles to the faces of Mama Squirrel and Baby Squirrel and Great-Grandpapa Squirrel. Everyone would be so happy. The policeman arrested a Negro who was attempting to sell marijuana to a 15-year-old vaguely Aryan-looking girl who just made the cheerleading squad. The streets were covered in snow.
Drawn to the image with the vacuum kit being throttled by cords and cables and tubes and such. I thought pretty conceptually throughout the whole process to create a musical bed that reflected the endless nature of a vacuum noise. When I think about housewives, I would like to think that they are able to choose this. Historically, the stereotypical image that I still have, a sort of a repressed or sort of a bored person. I wanted to reflect that in the music. I wanted to create something that was able to be repeated. I took the sounds, so I laid this drone of the vacuum over all of that. So there's just this chaotic, unending thing that fades in and out, and it doesn't change. You kind of feel like it could go on forever. Devin, he got the idea for his vocals from a recipe for chili that he found online that the author had turned into this weird vignette. That core, and then he bent it totally out of shape until it's just this exposed nerve of insanity in the inner monologue of a housewife.
You can also make it a day ahead. In fact, you should, because the flavor improves along with sits. The most important thing is to start with the right cut of meat. You want to buy chuck roast that is well marbled. That means it should have a good amount of white veins of fat running through it.
All of the portraits were great, but the two samples and pictures that we ended up being drawn to were of the vacuum and the hangers. I am a stay-at-home mom, so just looking at those pictures, I could completely relate. And to me, what I saw when I would look at those pictures was just the feeling of being overwhelmed and suffocated and isolated. There are days where I do feel like I don't have a minute to breathe, and my to-do list isn't getting any shorter, and I'm just counting down the minutes to when Ian gets home. But even though it is hard some days, like, it is also my biggest joy. So we wanted our track to show in each musical phrase the different phases, faces, and emotional places that we experience just being parents, and I think we were able to capture that. I cannot force anything out. The times that I've done that, I end up hating what I make. So I really have to be inspired when I create, and for me, a lot of that times that inspiration comes from characters, from books or movies. So to have those samples and images to draw inspiration from, it really wasn't that different from how I usually write. First listened to the samples, we knew we didn't want to make a vocal track. We wanted to go the instrumental route, somewhere along the lines of the microtronic stuff from broadcast and soundtrack music. I personally was having trouble with the idea of building a song around the samples, because I don't usually write like that. But Ian was like, don't think of it that way, let's just write and we'll fit the samples to what we make. We were able to steal some time away in our little studio while Grandma watched the kids. We just went in there and played freely. I was on the organ and Ian was on his drum set. Sometimes jams like that never really become anything, but we really liked what came out that day.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. The old clock I'm looking for. This clock.
The song was recorded between two cities, Brooklyn, where we are originally based out of, LA. At the time, Christy was spending, I guess, the summer over in LA. I was still back here in Brooklyn. For me personally, probably most of it was composed at night, at least musically anyway. Predominantly out of my kind of home studio setup, which is just pretty basic. There was obviously a bit of uniqueness involved to how we usually do it, because we never do it this way. I mean, in a sense, it was a project that both of us knew we would really enjoy, because it really relates to a lot of what we do. So in a way, it was really natural to us, but in another way, it wasn't, because we've never been approached this way to deal with the situation. Like, hey, here's numerous images, and you need to be creative based upon something that most stands out to you, and also the fact that we were both living on opposite sides of the country. So that was totally new to us, because we've always composed together in Brooklyn.
I selected this sound sample and then I sort of formed my piece off of the sound sample. I kind of went for old-time saloon Wild West train ride of a feel. I was trying to explore the idea of questioning your own existence or questioning your value and importance and place in the world. A lot of things that I related to in the image, in the whole series, the mystery of the ex-housewife, but also the X factor, the mystery factor, like who am I and what can I be? Did the housewife just say, I'm done, I'm gonna do this now? Or is the ex-housewife abandoned? The one that's sticking out to me right now is the pots and pans, where it's like almost like an armor enclosed place that's like disconnected from my surroundings in a way, but because I was like afraid to be myself or didn't know how to be myself. I can't think. This particular case was the first time I've ever written a piece of music specifically from a concept of a visual. What I got from the photo was just that the girl or the woman was sort of in a kneeling position. She was like on the ground or crouching, and she was just overcome with the clothes hangers, and she had this thought bubble. I related to the idea of being like bogged down by material or reality, and I just wanted to create a piece that vocally represent what it would sound like if you were inside my head, like hearing myself questioning my own existence. And sometimes it's a really angry, crazy experience. Sometimes it's a really vulnerable, and sometimes it's like, oh, I think I am, like in a confident, relaxing way. I wanted to express that dynamic vocally. When I actually sat down to do it, that ended up being like really free.
There was a uniqueness to it just based on the fact that I had an image in front of me and, something to work with, obviously, with the samples. Just allowed me to start something with the percussions that were given and the mood that actual image had put in my head. I just went with my gut and the first feeling I had, and, it definitely had to do with me in, past work situations. I chose that portrait because I related with it clearly, and it was just the first thing that I was thinking about. Past work situations in restaurants, bars. It's just that emotion that you have at the very end of the night when, had a long work day, and that's usually the very last thing you do is to sweep the mop. And by that time it's about 3, 4 a.m. and it's only you and drunks, people trying to sober up, and other bar workers, and just weirdos on the street, and it's just kind of like a creepy time of the night. It was a great base to start with percussions that came from just a real life situation. It was good to put it into a rhythm and build off that. It's good to build off something.
When I made this track, I was still living in Kansas City. It was winter, so it was really cold and snowing a lot. I'd work mostly at night from like 4 p.m. to whenever. So my room studio was sort of a reflection of like my mind at the time. There was like beer and wine bottles everywhere, piles of cigarette ash everywhere. Music was like the only way to make me happy, so this project was there for me at that time. I generally look at images and or video while I'm in the process of making a track. So this project wasn't really something necessarily new for me. I'd say the biggest difference was that I was making a track based on the images I was staring at. The images I chose spoke to me on a lot of different levels. The person in both of the images was anonymous.
Being anonymous is important to me.
They also spoke to me because I was a dishwasher at the time, and silverware and brooms were both something I handled regularly. Both their compositions opposed each other. One was more linear and rigid, whereas the other was more loose and fluid. I wanted to somehow find a sound using both of those elements. Incorporating the samples added the atmosphere to the track. The open space was filled with the sounds of silverware, and then those sounds would get swept away by the sounds of brooms into another attitude or vibration. The vocals I did for this track were entirely influenced by the movement and tonality of the track, like linear and fluid, fluid and linear.
Yes. I wrote this song in my bedroom, and no one was in the house. The first lyric just came to me.
I can't deny the cards that I've been dealt.
The imagery and the story behind the portraits, it's what has motivated me. That I could take the emotion that I felt with these portraits in particular and using whatever emotion came up for me, and then the lyrics just sort of presented themselves. It's usually from someone else's story that I am moved by, and then I put myself in their situation. I was most inspired by the Hanger's portrait. From that portrait, I could totally relate to her on so many levels. I got a sense of self-denial. It's just a sense of just being lost and trying to find your way out of this tunnel. Denying your chance at life, essentially, and feeling like you're never going to have another opportunity to be who you are or present yourself to the world in the way that you feel that is necessary. That portrait in particular sort of represents a hidden quality. I think that a lot of us spend a lot of time in these really dark spaces and we're too afraid to come out of them. There's distance there, and then I think that having even human interaction would be difficult, to where I can't really connect with people on a personal level, so I have to put this wall up. Or it was just certainly an expression of who I was, or who I am maybe at the time, I'm not sure which, but I can relate. Songwriting is what I do, and that's what I love. We just really wanted to bring the portraits emotion, and I wanted to bring what I felt sound. I feel like it's just bold to be in touch with those kinds of emotions that we hide from the world and even ourselves at times. But to be able to bring them into the light, I think it takes a lot of courage. These portraits represent those things that we keep hidden from the world and from other people and even ourselves at times. Another feeling that I had seeing that portrait in particular, I felt a great sense of uncertainty in my own life, and I felt like that's what I gathered from that struggle with, I'm sure, is entering in times in our lives where we feel uncertain and not sure what steps to take to move forward, but knowing that nothing stays the same. It's always just ever changing.